Good morning, Matt.
Good morning. Thanks very much.
Where in the world are you, Matt? Whereabouts are you calling from?
At the moment, I'm in Dublin, Ireland. I'm going to talk for the next, I thought you said 10, 15 minutes about risks in cloud data. Just a little bit about myself. I'm the CISO for Huawei Mobile Services, which is the part of the business that looks after the ecosystem that supports the mobile devices. Prior to that, I worked at Ulster Bank as the CISO for Ulster Bank, and before that, I was the CISO for IBM Cloud for a number of years, and a partner at IBM Security, advising clients on things like this. So, I suppose the first question is data in the cloud worth losing sleep over? And a couple of surveys that I came across. The first one, 36% of EU enterprises use cloud computing in 2020. And most of that was used for email and the storage of files. So, I mentioned a few seconds ago about collaboration. That's the kind of thing that it's being used for. And that's from an EU survey that was done in January 2021 for last year. So I can imagine that this year that number is only going to go up, and also that number seemed a little low to me. So I'm not sure if that survey it didn't include SMEs and just enterprises, because I think it's probably higher than 36%. But that, for large enterprises, 36% is quite a lot. And then 66% of IT professionals of us and people that work with and for us say that security is their biggest concern when they're adopting cloud. And that's a quote that comes directly from Forbes. That figure actually seems quite low to me, because as an IT professional with a security team, maybe it's because they're security, but they're all concerned about adopting cloud. Maybe businesses that don't know a huge amount about cloud, they're because they don't know what the risks are, they're less concerned about it. But yeah, at the moment, roughly exactly 2/3 of professionals are concerned and say that security is their biggest concern about cloud. As I mentioned, data in the cloud is only going one way, and we've seen this for the last at least 5 years. It's just every year, the amount of data that goes into the cloud is rocketing, and that is user data. So, for my organization, that's the data of the people that use our mobiles, our tablets, our laptops. For regulated industries, banks, governments, all of their user data it can potentially be stored in the cloud and needs to be managed. But we're also increasingly putting company data, so our financial information, our IP, a lot of that is going into the cloud as we become more comfortable with the cloud. So the organizations are happier to put those two types of information, the user data and the company data, into the various clouds. And the risks of doing that really depend on the model of cloud that you use. I'm sure many of you will have seen charts similar to that one on the far right, the shared model idea. Depending on which type of cloud you're using, you face different level of risks. So we've got the three basic types of cloud: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. So the least risky of all would be the software as a service. So everything in grey there is something that your cloud service provider or your application provider, whether it be something like Salesforce or whatever, that's something that they manage. So you can see that from the application right the way down to the networking, your SaaS service provider is responsible for that. So they would be responsible for the security, for managing the risk of a SaaS application. Then you move up to the next one, which is platform as a service, or PaaS, where you get operating systems, middleware, and runtime services, which are managed by your provider. But you're layering data and applications on top of that, which you are responsible for managing the security and assessing the risks of. And then we've got the infrastructure as a service. And there's two types of infrastructure as a service. This one here, where the supplier is giving you a virtualization layer, and you're putting your operating system, middleware, and so on, all the way up to your applications. So effectively, all they're giving you is somewhere to put your machines, and you assume the most risk in infrastructure as a service, because you're developing applications, you're installing the operating system, so you're responsible for patching and so on. So that is the most risky that you can take on. And how do we manage risk? So within the EU, and obviously I'm including the UK in that, but the data protection officers, the data protection commissioners throughout the EU say that for a data breach to have occurred, there has to have been a security breach. So if you're investigating whether a data breach has occurred, without a corresponding security breach, you can't consider it a data breach. So to manage those risks, one of the most important things is that we engage the exec teams and the top level management. Historically, security has not been great at doing this, and we have been guilty of trying to put in solutions and certifications and trying to push them into the business, rather than understanding that security is no longer the block, or it should no longer be considered as the block or the security police that it used to be. And we're now, and have fought for a long time to get a seat at the top table so that we can be part of the business. And the decisions that we make need to be informed by business. So one of the key things is first of all, to engage with the exec teams, get their buy-in, and work with them. The second one is very related, understanding what the risks are themselves. So, based on the model that I showed you a few minutes ago, understand what your risks are, and then communicate those risks to the C-level, to the top level management, and that helps to get their buy-in. And then the last thing that we can do is to prepare and practice for any types of incidents, whether they're security incidents or privacy incidents. And then a little bit more about each of those. So getting top level management buy-in. If you don't have a C-level or equivalent title, then you need to make it your job to get support for the people who do, or the people who can help you to influence that C-suite. Data security is probably the most important thing within the business. A breach of security or a loss of data can cost your organization an awful lot, and that is in terms of reputational damage, loss of customers, and also financially. If it's a data breach, the fines for that are potentially massive. In my own organization, our CEO has stated publicly that data security and privacy is the most important thing within the business, above the amount of revenue that we make. And it sounds like a bold claim, but I'm sure that a lot of senior execs and chief execs and chairmen would say the same, because they're liable for a lot of these things. And then understanding what the risks are in the business that you're in. What are the risks that are more pronounced? You need to understand them. You need to understand your company culture and the amount of risk they're willing to accept by putting company and customer data into the cloud. Is the organization regulated? If you're a bank, then you have to deal with various central banks in whatever country you're in. If you're in any regulated industry, you're going to have to deal with the regulators, and they could come knocking on your door at any point and ask you what due diligence you've done about putting things in the cloud. And you need to have a good story as to why you put things in the cloud, how you look after them, so that it's a good conversation. And the final thing there is, do you have the staff and the tools? If you have staff that are used to working with cloud and are experienced, that makes things obviously an awful lot easier. Do you have the right tools? Do you have a SOC in place that is enabled to integrate with your cloud service provider? Or if you're in the position of building your own cloud, you need to make sure that whatever risks you see can be fed through to your SOC, so that they can manage those. And then finally, preparation and practice. If you have, or when you have an incident response plan, you need to make sure that over time it is regularly rehearsed, and that as those rehearsals take place, the output that you end up with at the end of the rehearsal goes back into making that plan stronger. So each time you run through a rehearsal, you should end up with a report at the end that says, this is how it went. These are the things we can do better. And this is what we think we did well, and this is where we can improve. And then you just go back to your policy and you can amend that. So practice and preparation. So you've succeeded in getting the management buy-in. You understand the risks that you are facing in your particular organization and role. So how do you prepare, and what type of practice should you be doing? The first one is tabletop exercises, and I'm sure many of you already do this, but there are simulated non-technical events run by typically the security team, and they include, if not the whole business, large portions of the business. And they are, as it says, exercises that are run under normal circumstances around a physical table, and everybody gets to play their part in the exercise and do what they would normally do in an incident. Then you've got the red and blue team exercises, which is kind of the next stage up. It's a simulated tech event, often using a third party. So maybe the company that does your penetration testing or your auditing could do this for you. You might give them access to your network and allow them to, maybe in a development environment or a test environment, to drop a file somewhere or take a file, and you run with it as if it is a real event. The key to this is to tell as few people as possible that this is going to happen. What you do need to do is use safety rails so that it doesn't get out of control. And again, you need to include in this case, the whole business. So you would include HR, finance, your customer services, everybody that has legal, everybody that has a stake in protecting data and protecting the business. The third thing is that you should always work from a playbook. Follow what that playbook does, follow the procedures and the policies. And the main reason for that is so that in an incident, nobody is panicking, nobody makes any serious decisions during that process. So the worst thing that can happen is that during an incident, people are making important and serious decisions, because at that time, their judgment can be impaired. They're trying to think very quickly. So if you've been through this cycle a few times, then your playbook will have all those decisions in it, and things like, what tweets should we send out to let our customers and the public and the press know, and at what times, and what should the content be, and you really need to include almost everything that you can think of in that playbook, so that an incident literally starts at the beginning. You follow the things through, you deal with them as they come up, but there shouldn't be any surprises for anybody, and there should be, as I said, no serious decisions made during that process. The playbook should contain everything. And then the final step is to review and to improve that playbook. So at the end of it, you've got the report that says what you did well and what could have been done better. You review the playbook and the policy. You make whatever changes you think are needed. And then that gets reviewed by the legal team, by the privacy team, and by the senior management team. And once it's agreed, then that then becomes the new version of the playbook and the policy. And you repeat that exercise on a regular basis. So you can see it's for those that work with ITIL, it's a continuous improvement. You run the exercise, you get all the way to the bottom, you review it, and then improve your process and run through it again.
Thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Matt.